How can occupational licensure be reconciled with the principles of free enterprise? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. I am Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you the principled and uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
It's good to be with you and our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, well, I read an article, Richard, in which the barbers and hairstylists in Oklahoma are outraged. I mean, just totally angry and outraged because there's legislators who are proposing either the elimination or the drastic reduction of licensure laws, occupational licensure laws. They're suggesting these things, we don't really need them. And so the barbers and the hairstylists who already have their licenses are up in arms because they're saying, look, this protects people from incompetent barbers and hairstylists. And one of them said, when we're doing hair, we actually feel along the neck and the back for cancerous tumors that they could advise their customers to go see a doctor, and that without licensure, they wouldn't do that, that anybody in his dog could be a hairstylist or a barber. But Richard, it seems to me that this whole occupational licensure thing is not really a question of whether it's needed or not. It's really just a racket. It really does protect the people that get the licensures from competition. I mean, it's the furthest thing you could have from an open and free market where people are free to live their lives the way they want, become hairstylists and barbers and so forth, and let the consumers decide. And one of the people who had the biggest impact on me in this area was Milton Friedman. And Friedman was going to attack occupational licensure, and he could have used the easy models like shoe shine people and saying, you don't really need to have a license to shine shoes. But he said, no, that really wouldn't be effective. But if you're going to combat a particular program, philosophy, policy, you've got to take the most difficult case. Because then if people can see the logic behind the most difficult case, then everything else falls into place. So Friedman took the most difficult case in licensure, and that's in the healthcare industry, doctors. He argued that there should be no medical licensure for doctors. And he made a very persuasive case. And if you accept that case, then obviously the case for a licensure in barbers or hairstylists and shoe shine people goes right out the window. But the main thing for me, Richard, is that, you know, in a genuinely free society, people have a right to sustain their lives. I mean, that's what the Declaration of Independence is all about. Right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have to ask government for permission. If you got to ask government for permission to sustain your life through labor, you're not really free at all. And so a genuinely free society is you establish anything you want to in terms of your occupation, your profession, your business. You don't ask anybody's permission. You put your shingle out. If people want to patronize you, that's fine. If they don't want to patronize you, that's fine too. If they don't, then you go out of business. But why in the world should people have to ask for permission to sustain their lives from the government? How is that possibly reconcilable with a free society? What do you think, Richard?
Well, I think that it's not consistent with a free society and has been the bane of societies, including Western societies, for centuries. The most famous instance of this from the medieval years, the years of Middle Ages, as they're called, 1200s or 1300s and so on, was that in the towns there were guilds. In the medieval feudal towns, there were guilds. And these guilds were associations of various occupations. And they controlled entry into these occupations and professions, whether it be the blacksmith or their version of a barber, or whether it be a craftsman of any sort. And you could not practice in these professions without the entry into an approval and a training apprenticeship under a master. What were the functions of now they use the same type of arguments that you were alluding to in this Oklahoma business. We're maintaining standards. We're assuring minimal quality. We're training people for competency under an apprenticeship of an approved master in the guild. What was the bottom line of this? These were methods to restrict entry, that is, limit competition, to prevent rivalrousness in the sense of offering better prices because prices were set by the guilds, and restricting innovations. New ways of doing things disrupts the existing ways of doing things. And the new guy who has a new idea of whether it be a craft or blacksmithing or even cutting hair and attracts customers to him because this is new, better, and maybe he's offering it a little bit for less, is going to take away the business, reduce the profits, the market shares, or even the gainful employment of those who are being sheltered by the guild's rules and restrictions. Now, basically what we have in the modern age, our modern times with government licensing and so on, of professions and occupations and skilled activities, and skilled is broad here, is just a form of the guild. And rather than the guild managing themselves, the government is now serving as the agent for specialized segments in the division of labor who want to be protected from the competition of new, better, improved, and price competitive alternatives. So it is not surprising that in a place like Oklahoma, the barbers and the shampooers and beauticians are up in arms because they're afraid that people will come in and open their shingle and say, "We cut hair too. We do fashioning of hair. We style hair. We color hair," and that's out of their control and would threaten them. It's the same thing, for example, with licensing to be a cab driver. In New York City, why do the licensed cab companies hate Uber and Lyft? Because Uber and Lyft is outside of their restrictions and controls of when they go on the road, what prices they can charge, and so on. And so the taxi cab companies in most major cities where you can't drive a cab without a government license of one sort or another, in New York, it's called a medallion, we're up in arms because they're like one of those medieval guilds. They want to limit entry, control how the product is offered, and the price at which it's sold. And this is just a way of restricting competition. So who is being helped? The small existing providers of the service on the production side of the division of labor. Who is harmed by these regulations? All those who would like to earn a living pursuing these professions and occupations, and all of the members of the consuming public who might benefit and wish to choose from having a wider selection of quality and price and offering of services. So basically, this is the special interest using the state, just like the medieval guilds, against the interest of the rest of the society. Now, you had mentioned doctors. The fact is, they often talk about a shortage of doctors in society. Well, why? Because there are quotas on the acceptance of the number of students into medical schools into the United States. And this is basically overseen by the American Medical Association, the entrance exams, the exams you have to take to qualify. Now, maybe some of our viewers and listeners remember when Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan was president, and he invaded a little island in the Caribbean called Grenada, because supposedly he was threatened with a communist regime, a Marxist regime. But well, the reason why it was considered, there were Americans on this little island in a significant number. Why were they there, Jacob? They were going to medical school in this little Caribbean island of Grenada. Why? Because they had not been able to be accepted at American schools because of the implicit quotas on how many schools could be built in the United States, the number of seats in classrooms, and therefore the number of freshman students that could be accepted to the incoming school sessions for medical school. Now, these Americans studying at a medical school in Grenada were not necessarily Yahoo bumpkins. They had good GPAs. They had good SAT, whatever the medical version of an SAT for graduate school would be. They were all qualified people. but they had set a maximum, a quota on how many could be accepted. So rather than having to wait God knows how long to be in the queue for an American medical school, or not being able to go to medical school at all, they have chosen this option of going to Grenada to acquire their medical degree and then go into a process of taking exams back in the United States to be licensed in that way. So as a consequence of this, basically what Reagan was rationalizing invading this little Caribbean country for was we have to protect Americans from a threatened Marxist government takeover because, oh, they're going to a medical school because the medical profession wants to limit entry and control prices and availabilities in the United States. And that was now, of course, that's not how Reagan presented it on television or in Breakheart Ridge, the Clint Eastwood movie. But the fact is that that's basically what it was about. So this licensing, whether it be for braiding hair in Black communities, or the kind of hair coloring thing that you're talking about, or giving a massage, or the other business, these are all ways of limiting competition for the benefit of a select special interest group at the expense of the rest of the producer and consumer members of the society.
Yeah, you make an interesting point about the medallions in New York City, because there was a certain limited number of taxi drivers. And so the medallions would be able to be transferred. If a guy wanted to get out of the taxi business, he could sell his medallion to another guy who wanted to get in. So there was actually a market price for these medallions. And at their peak, I think they were like $100,000. So you'd sell your medallion. The new taxi driver would be down $100,000, but he would hope to recoup that because he had limited entry in terms of competition. He could easily make the money back over a period of time. All of a sudden, Uber and Lyft come in, and guess what happens to the value of those medallions? I mean, they plummeted. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how low they got, but there's clearly a huge loss there. So the people that have this vested interest are clearly going to oppose any type of change in the system. If you look at these hairdressers and beauty salon people and stuff, they have to go to a school to get this license.
Yes.
And the school costs thousands of dollars. So these people spend thousands of dollars, and now all of a sudden, somebody's saying, well, let's abolish this. They're saying, well, wait a minute, we put in thousands of dollars to our school. And to me, it's just a racket. But my response to them is, hey, don't complain. You can compete on the basis that you're able to provide a more qualified service than other people can. You're better trained, you're better educated, and so forth. But that certainly should not be used as an excuse to prevent freedom of entry. The other thing is the law business, Richard. I was a lawyer for the first 12 years of my professional career, and lawyers are licensed. And I find that really interesting because the idea behind lawyer licensing is that you assure competent and ethical lawyers for the public. Well, how's that worked out for them? I mean, there are so many incompetent lawyers and so many unethical lawyers that it's clear that this is just a great big joke. But it's the same thing. It limits entry. So if somebody practices law without a license, like let's say they start preparing divorce petitions, oh boy, the American Bar Association, I'm not sure whether they're the ones, but somebody ends up filing a lawsuit to stop this type of thing. Oh, we've got to protect the public. Oh my gosh, this is outrageous. They're practicing law without a license. When in fact, there's a lot of competent people that can prepare divorce petitions or a simple will without having a law degree. And it's just a protection racket. That's all it is a sheer protection racket to protect lawyers from competition and keep their fees up.
Yeah, you had mentioned Milton Friedman. Now, Friedman first made this case in a slightly detailed way in a chapter of his book Capitalism and Freedom, which was published back in 1962. And in making the case for ending licensing, even of doctors, he was not saying, well, let any Yahoo, any Yahoo, I suppose, could. But what he was basically saying, there's private sector certification. That is, if you go into a doctor's office and you need to have a consultation an expert give you their best diagnosis, a judgment as to what tests you should have given your symptoms that you've expressed or the doctor has observed. Uh, you could have and there are private certification associations that have standards, often influenced and guided by insurance companies. I should mention, for those who are interested in this, there's an excellent little book called Regulation Without the State by John Blundell, who's unfortunately passed away a good number of years ago. For many years, he was the president of the Free Market Institute of Economic Affairs in London, England. It can be downloaded, I believe, for free on the website of IEA. What he basically argues there is that you don't need the state for regulation. And he starts off by saying, what is the origin of the word regulation? The regularizing of things, standards, benchmarks. And he goes through this whole litany of chapter after chapter of whether it be a profession or a particular product, how there are these private associations and organizations that test products, that have standards and benchmarks of safety and reliability. Services have this way, all forms of certification. Who often pressures people in the marketplace to become part of this and have their own version of these products meet the standards of these private certification associations? Insurance companies. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're the manufacturer of some product. You might be sued by a customer. Well, being sued by a customer means that you probably want to have an insurance policy to help weather the storm if you are. Well, an insurance company loves to receive premiums. It doesn't like to do payouts on claims, which means that it's in their interest, the insurance companies, that if they're going to insure you and in price ranges that you can afford to pay without them being exorbitant because they're concerned about the liability of insuring you, you have to meet these private sector standards of these associations and product certifying organizations. You're not forced to, but if you want to have a brand name reputation, a personal reputation, reliability, skill, profession, expertise, then you have a self-interest in being able to tell your existing and prospective customers, or if you're a doctor, your patients, this is where I went to medical school, or I had some other certifying process. This is what I'm skilled in, and this is where you can check out to see my qualifications, expertise, and the cleanness of my my legal record of not being sued for malpractice, et cetera, et cetera. And Friedman presents this in a very methodical and logical and persuasive way that is far better than my just trying to summarize an argument from his book. But it's the way the market would solve these problems without reliance upon the state. And as you were correctly saying, the idea of, well, if you don't have this, every quack will be out there. Well, I mean, you now have the insistence and the monopoly determining of licensing of doctors and lawyers, and the degree to which patients are dissatisfied with the quality of the service, the expertise and knowledge of the service, the skill and patience of the doctor, their attention to both treatment and post-operation care, testifies to the fact that the existing medical profession under government regulation is far from perfect. So to be honest, it couldn't get worse and would likely be far better.
Yeah, that's a great point about private certifying agencies, because people have that conception of, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to a quack and he's going to do brain surgery on me. Well, that's not the way life works. You have Underwriters Laboratory, for example, that certifies, whether something is safe or not, and people rely on that certification. And the same thing would happen in the medical profession. You could still have the American Medical Association as a private group of physicians and say, look, these are all the physicians in our group, in this association. We certify that they're all competent, they're all professional, you can feel good about it. If you go outside this range, well, you take your chances. Well, it's what does a person do when he's trying to decide whether to have, who to have to do his brain surgery? Well, he goes to his family doctor and he says, can you give me some recommendations here? Or he does research on the internet, or he'll go to other agencies and say, who are the certified doctors in this area? And that's the way life really works. And the fact that those kind of agencies would arise would give people that sense of protection. But at the same time, if somebody says, well, I don't want to use any of this official medicine stuff. I want alternative healthcare. I don't trust the medical profession. They're over there making people sick. They don't do preventive healthcare and so forth. Great. Then everybody that wants alternative healthcare, that wants to go to a nature kind of person that's prescribing natural type stuff to treat cancer or whatever, they would be free to do that. Everybody's making his own choices. I mean, you see this in all this vaccine business. Seems to me, Richard, that everybody just does his own research on vaccines. There's people saying, well, they're very damaging. There's other people saying, no, they save lives. Well, each person's got to make his own decision. This is not a risk-free life. There's risk whichever way you go, usually. And so everybody does his own research. The other thing I want to point out is the concept of free enterprise. I mean, we're that phrase is so trite in American society because everybody favors America's free enterprise system, right? I mean, we're all grown up that we being taught that this is a free enterprise country and America's free enterprise system. Well, how is that term free enterprise reconcilable with a regime of licensure laws? Now, obviously it is. I mean, it's been redefined to absorb this occupational licensure regime, but it's actually quite contrary to a genuine system of free enterprise. Free enterprise originally meant, and the reason it was so radical was it meant a economic enterprise that is free of government control and regulation. And throughout history, governments had regulated economic activity. As you point out, you go back to the Middle Ages with the guilds. But if you go into the age of mercantilism, I mean, the state regulated the most minute aspects of economic affairs. So when Adam Smith comes up with this concept in 1776 of free enterprise, what he's saying is a very radical idea. Enterprise is totally free of government control or regulation, a separation of economic activity in the state. Just as we separate church and state, where we don't let the government regulate churches and religion, so it would be with economic activity. And that's the real meaning of free enterprise. Enterprise is free of government control, and that's about as far as you can get away from free enterprise with this system of licensure.
Well, let me sort of make a point about this as well. You know, you're using the example of mercantilism. That was basically the 16th and 17th, 18th century versions of the planned economy. The government determined who could produce different products, the methods at which they could be manufactured, the prices at which they could be sold. For example, in France, which was sort of like a poster child for mercantilism in the 1700s, the government regulations were so meticulous, it specified how many stitches should be used to attach a button to a shirt, the width of a shirt's collar, what crops could be grown, by whom, where, and in what quantities. And if you planted a crop that had not been approved for a particular part of France, they would just come onto your farm and dig everything up. They ruin your entire farm. But when these mercantilist regulations were begun to be eliminated, then were at the end of the day repealed, it basically opened the market to innovation, change, the Industrial Revolution. Now, what was the response of many people as their professions were being disrupted by the new industrialization methods, the undermining of the cheap labor of agriculture, as people were swarming to the manufacturing cities, particularly in Britain first, where jobs could be acquired at better wages in the time back then, certainly better than an agricultural work. And not in all the climate changes, because you were in the factory where you were protected from the weather in that sense. What was the consequence? It radically transformed the entire society. What was the response of many people? Well, one group is called the Luddites. They would go into factories and destroy the machines because it was undermining the employment in the more simple craft industry. But it was precisely because the market was free that we have all the benefits of the free enterprise of that time: industrialization, technological innovations, cost efficiencies, greater productivity, massive amounts of output. Fast forward to today. What is now bringing about the new Luddite movement? Artificial intelligence. Oh my God. They're going to have these machines that are going to think for us and do for us. And oh, who will be employed when they can just have a machine taking calls or doing this and that and the other? Just ask yourself. And they want to control this. This is going to undermine society. Jobs will be lost. Entire sectors of the economy will be undermined. Well, the fact is, this goes on all the time and has been allowed to go on. Let me give one example of this, which some of the older listeners and viewers might easily remember. But go back and watch a movie from the 1950s or 1960s that has an office scene. Okay. It is likely that in some part of the movie, you will see the secretarial pool. These were women, mostly women, but also men, who did nothing else but type. First on old-fashioned manual typewriters, and then in the 60s with the electric typewriters, but just typing. What were they doing? Bills, correspondence, internal memos, records that had to be kept, et cetera, et cetera. An entire segment of the labor force was employed just typing. Where are they now? They're gone for the most part. And why? The personalized desktop and laptop computer. Everyone, you don't need to have things corrected. You don't have to have things rewritten. You just do this yourself. Spell check, grammar check, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to have 4 versions because you just make the corrections and then you just send it out. You don't even need the postal room and the postal worker anymore. You just send it by a text message or an email attachment. So this has transformed and destroyed an entire segment of the working age population who are involved in those practices just in the 1950s and 60s. Where are they now? They shifted into different employments that previously could not be fulfilled because the hands literally were tied up doing other things that now technological innovation has made unnecessary for them to be employed in. The same thing is going to be with AI. Who knows what forms, what segments will see a decrease, what sectors of the economy will see an increase. But as long as there are unfulfilled wants, there will always be work to be done that frees hands to do things that now thinking machines can do better than just mechanical machines as in the past through their innovation. Imagine if now we need government regulation of AI. Oh, it could be a threat to society. Well, oh, unions and our employees are concerned about this. What if the government could prevent the introduction of industrial manufacturing methods in the early decades of the 19th century? What would our standards of living be today? It would have been halted or slowed down or inhibited. And we would all be living lower and less successful and enjoyable standards of living. The floodgates have to be open to innovation. We have to be allowing entrepreneurs to come up with new and better ideas, to make better mousetraps at better prices that make us all have a higher standard of living than would other be the case. And 50 years from now, even 20 years from now, when more of this AI stuff is going on, this artificial intelligence things are going on, we're going to look back from 20 years from now, 50 years from now, and say, look how the economy has been transformed. And people who lost their jobs, like those typing people, they just transitioned into other things, or the next generation didn't go and do that. They now just went into another line of work. Just as some typists retired and they were replaced by young people who had typing jobs, they now just do other things instead of entry-level typing jobs that become their professions. It'll be the same thing with AI. It's important for the economy to be free, not just because people should be able to make their own choices. That's the bedrock principle of liberty, but also it is a means to another end, and that is the improvement of all of our conditions by allowing people to creatively do things and apply things and offer things in ways that others had not thought of or had been reluctant or could not do as well, that at the end of the day makes for both a free and an unbelievably prosperous society.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's what the economist Schumpeter called creative destructionism, where you have the dynamics of an unhampered market economy that is bringing new things into existence all the time that are putting businesses out of business, but in the process, significantly raising the overall standard of living. So when the automobiles invented, I mean, there could have been a lot of resistance. Oh, this is horrible because it's going to put the buggy whip makers out of business. I mean, my gosh, what do we need buggy whips for now that we got automobiles?
Well, all that would be left for the whip makers would be for sado and masochists.
Yeah. Well, I'm tempted to say we ought to just quit on that note, but I want to make one final point, and that is that let me see, what was my train of thought? Yeah, that this is, when you look at licensure laws and other regulations, it really is the paternalistic mindset, Richard, that government is our daddy, that it should take care of us, that it should protect us from unsavory barbers and hairdressers and shoe shine people and doctors and lawyers. And once you realize that that's not the kind of society you want to live in, you don't want to live in a paternalistic society where the government's your daddy, then it becomes a fairly simple thing to say, I don't want to be a kept person. I'm an adult. I want to live my life as an adult. I don't want to be taken care of and managed by the state. And it becomes a fairly easy thing to say we need just to get rid of all these laws, rules, and regulations and truly free the economy. On that note, we'll wrap things up. We're out of time. Greatly enjoyed the conversation as always, Richard. Come and visit us at fff.org for 34 years of principled arguments on liberty. I've got a podcast, a video presentation on the JFK assassination that I'm currently doing. Getting a lot of good feedback on that. And just came back from Freedom Fest. They'll be posting the videos there. I participated in the mock trial there on open borders. I also did a presentation on the JFK assassination. So we'll let y'all know when those are, well, the JFK assassination, I recorded myself. They weren't recording, but that recording came out. So we're going to post that at FFF soon. So in any event, come and visit us. And Richard, I look forward to talking to you next week.
Absolutely. And I hope that our viewers and listeners will keep watching our videos in spite of the fact that you've never been licensed to be the head of a nonprofit organization.
Oh, good point.